Today we're going to start general and special senses. Let's begin with the sensory receptors. First, they can be special cell processes. Second, they can be separate cells. Or third, they can monitor conditions both inside and outside of the body. Let's go into free nerve cell endings. They are the simplest receptors. They are modified dendritic endings, and examples would be touch receptors, pain receptors, heat receptors, and taste receptors. There are also more complex structures. Some examples include visual receptors in the eyes and auditory receptors in the ears. Sensation and perception are important in the human being. Sensation occurs in our brain. The action potential from the afferent pathway arrives in the sensory cortex. Perception is the awareness and interpretation of the sensory input by the integration areas of the cerebral cortex. Adaptation is a reduction in the sensitivity due to a constant stimulus. An example of this would be jumping into a cold lake. Some sensory receptors adapt quickly. Some are slow to adapt or don't adapt at all, like pain receptors. When you jump into a cold lake, pretty soon you don't feel the cold anymore. Let's move into the general senses. They include temperature, pain, touch, pressure, and vibration. Proprioception is body position and it occurs throughout the body. The special senses include the 5 main senses. Know all these. Olfaction is smell, gustation is taste, vision, equilibrium is balance, and hearing. Hearing is very important for the human being, as we all know. Most of these are concentrated in the sense organs and located in the head. Let's go into the general sensory receptors. Basically, they're classified by the type of stimulus that activates them. So nociceptors respond to pain. Thermoreceptors respond to temperature. Mechanoreceptors respond to touch, pressure, and body position. And chemoreceptors respond to chemical stimuli. Make sure you know all of these. Now let's cover each individually. Let's begin with nociceptors. Nociceptors, they have free nerve endings that adapt very slowly. They can respond to extremes of temperature, mechanical damage, and dissolved chemicals. There's something called fast pain, and that's transmitted to the central nervous system through the myelinated axons. There's slow pain, and that's transmitted through the unmyelinated axons, and that can be a burning or aching. And then there's referred pain, and that's a perception of pain to an unrelated area of the body. And that ends nociceptors. Here are some examples of referred pain. The liver and gallbladder will go to the right side of the upper back and shoulder. The heart will go down the right arm. The stomach and intestine can go to the colon area, and the ureters can go down to the testes. Let's begin thermoreceptors. We have free nerve endings, and they're in the dermis, skeletal muscles, liver, and hypothalamus. There's cold receptors. They're more numerous than warm receptors, and they use the same pathway as pain receptors, but thermoreceptors are adaptive. There are 3 classes of mechanoreceptors. There's tactile receptors that are touch, baroreceptors that are pressure, and proprioceptors that are position. Make sure you know all of them. Tactile receptors include fine touch and pressure receptors and crude touch and pressure receptors. Baroreceptors monitor changes in pressure in the viscera. They're found in the major blood vessels, lungs, digestive system, and urinary tracts. This gives you an illustration of the baroreceptors and where they're located. Proprioceptors monitor position. Chemoreceptors respond to chemicals in solution in the body fluids. They include central nervous system receptors that monitor the cerebrospinal fluid, the plasma concentrations of carbon dioxide, and pH. This shows you where the chemoreceptors are located. and the respiratory centers of the medulla oblongata, the chemoreceptors of the carotid bodies, and the chemoreceptors of the aortic bodies. That affects cranial nerve number 9 and 10, and they can trigger reflexive adjustments to respiratory and cardiovascular activity. Next are the special sense organs of olfaction. First, it includes the olfactory organs themselves, the olfactory epithelium, and that includes the olfactory receptor cells. And then finally, the olfactory glands. They're deeper and they secrete the mucus. Air is warmed and moistened as it is inhaled. It's also filtered. Olfaction receptor cells detect odorants that are chemicals in the air that bind to proteins. And we're able to respond to over 1,000 unique smells. This is an image showing you the olfactory pathway to the cerebrum. Next is gustation, or the special sense of gustation. We have gustatory receptors. They're gustatory cells of the taste buds, and they're found on the sides of the papillae. Remember that the gustatory cells have microvilli. They're called taste hairs that extend through the taste pores. Taste hairs respond to chemicals in solution. That triggers a change in the membrane potential of the taste cells. Now, know this, see that it's starred. The primary taste sensations are sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. We also have receptors of the pharynx for water. Next, within the taste pathway, we have the facial nerve, number 7, the glossopharyngeal nerve, number 9, and vagus nerve, number 10. This is an illustration showing you the tongue and showing you where the sweet, salty, bitter, and sour is, and then umami, and last but not least, where the water receptors are in the pharynx. And that shows you a close-up of the taste buds. Make sure you know that.